himself further.
Hi everyone, I haven't been here for ages, sorry, I'm useless. Sort of. I run a company called Purple, we do PHP webby stuff and so on. One of my customers is this sort of great site called anorak.co.uk. If you think of like the sun or the star or something like that, imagine it online, so you've got loads of interesting pictures, dodgy titles and stuff like that, pictures of Kate Middleton and so on and so on. You'd be getting right close to the mark. They came to me like, I don't know, 9 months ago as a referral through Brightmark, as it turns out. And they had like a few problems with sysadmin and stuff to start with. Fixed those, that was fine. And then I started looking a bit further and noticed actually it's quite a busy server and the server was like a bit sort of taxed and so on. Or at least the pages were fairly slow to load. Like some random stats, I don't know if 2 million page hits is a lot per month. It seems quite a lot to me, but perhaps some of you have more. It's a standard WordPress blog and it's on a single server. I think it's got about 8 cores and 12 gig of RAM, something like that, so it's nothing hugely overspec. It's a Linux box, runs Debian and so on, and that's what the great site will look like on a normal day. So the sort of interesting things to note, obviously, from my point of view, I'm trying to make the site as quick to load as possible, or at least that's like a side project of mine. They have loads of adverts, so you've got like this here, there's like Google AdWords sometimes, and down here, after you've got a gallery which normally consists of about 12 1 meg images, sometimes they're GIFs and things floating around. There's normally like a few videos also down there which sort of load in Flash and so on. So anyway, it's WordPress, so on. So initially it was pretty slow to load, and every time they sort of managed to get some interesting pictures on there, or vaguely high Google rankings, the server would get pretty busy. He would ring me up and moan that his server was like slow and so on. So to start with, I thought I'd better find out what's going on, so I got some pretty graphs to look at to give me some idea of traffic on the server. So this is Munin, which you may or may not be aware of. It plugs into various things on the server, like the Apache status output, or server status, as you might or may not be aware of. And you get loads of nice, pretty graphs out of it, so you can see like how many accesses a second or whatever Apache's trying to deal with. And hopefully you can realise there are some nice, interesting trends, like you're going to run out of disk space in a month, or whatever it happens to be. You can also see, like, obviously, other graphs from MySQL, so perhaps every year you can see that look, the site's getting busier and so on, but what sort of happened here and so on, or conversely, what happened about there to make the server get more busy. And it could be, when did they get married? Kate and Thingy, was that start of May? Or?
You're asking the wrong people.
I probably am, aren't I? I have a feeling it was the start of May. I know the server got extremely busy then. I think that was it, for instance. This sort of fallen off afterwards. I know it's like due to me because I've been like busy doing some fake stuff. And if I look at other graphing stuff, so this is like Webalizer, so it parses the Apache access log and gives you like how many bytes and hits and so on from various things. The interesting thing here is that, for instance, we've got like Pippa Middleton doing something down here, but that isn't really very high up the list of things. And you can see, well, actually, the largest single thing we've got that takes up our bandwidth is things like jQuery, MooTools, Starsheets, and rubbish like that. So all of this stuff is stuff that it's not really the content of the site itself. It's perhaps third-party stuff. So I can sort of look through that and try and minify them, try and get them to be cached better in the browser and so on, or get them hosted elsewhere, so via Google or what have you. And hopefully if I remove some of these, well, I might free up, say, 10% capacity on the server, and that will make things work better. So initially I came and looked at it, and I'm pretty sure there were some days when I went to a front page and there was about 15 meg of crap being downloaded, sorry, content downloaded. There were like, there's this great GIF image of an Indian man on a horse sliding under a truck or something, which is great to look at, but it's like an animated GIF. It lasts about 30 seconds. They don't have a thumbnail of it, so it was like just being resized through HTML and so on. So you've got like a 15 meg page being loaded, and it's okay if you visit the site often, because obviously you've got everything in your browser cache, but most people don't. And obviously Kate Middleton came along and so on. Initially, when I sort of took over looking after it, I think they were running like WordPress 2.7 with vulnerabilities unpatched and all that sort of stuff, so that was great. It's been pretty painful to upgrade it because they tend to like hack the plugins and change these little bits and pieces and so on. But otherwise, it's a standard MySQL, Apache PHP, and so on. Initially, my first thing, well, if you do PHP, you will come across opcode caches. This just speeds up PHP's performance and scheme of things. That's an easy thing to do. Like, I don't really have to change any PHP code or anything, it's just some stuff to install. Other things, get expiry headers correct on images and style sheets and things to encourage browsers to cache them. So you can do something a bit like that. If any of you are interested in sort of web server stuff, then you probably know this already. I can also enable compression, so anything that's vaguely text-based that the server returns, it can compress for the browser to get. So obviously that means you can send more stuff back in less time. And then there's, like, for instance, tools like MySQL Tuner, which is just a Perl script. You can wget mysqltuner.pl, run it in the command line. It might ask you for, like, database username and password, and it will come back to you saying, oh, you should do this, you should do this, you should increase this cache size, and so on. You have a lot of slow queries, whatever it happens to be, so you can jig around with the MySQL config stuff and hopefully make things a bit better. So for instance, with MySQL, I think the default query cache size is something pretty small, like 8 or 32 megabytes. So you can increase that to something vaguely useful. If you've got like huge amounts of memory, then you may as well. Likewise with InnoDB, turn on things like slow query login so you get some idea of what's causing load on the database. Maybe if we look at what queries have been slow, we can add an index on, and that will speed things up and make the site a bit snappier.
What is an InnoDB?
I think actually I mentioned that briefly on the next slide or somewhere, so don't worry yet. Yeah, indeed. So good timing. With MySQL, there are a load of different sort of underlying data formats you can use to store the data. The default one is MyISAM, which is sort of, it's been around forever. It tends to be the default, or has been until recently. It's pretty quick for like just doing, give me this record that's got this identifier sort of thing. But the problem with it is if you go to update a table that's using that format, it locks the whole table. So anyone who's trying to read from it at the same time as you're trying to write to it gets locks. So for instance, it was the case that whenever the guy who writes Anorak was going to like post his next article or create a revision of an article, that was writing to the WP posts table, and the site would lock up for somewhere like somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes, depending on the time of day and how busy things were, which obviously isn't the best thing to have happen. And I also discovered there was this random plugin that had been installed which sort of recorded the number of hits each page had, and again that was using MyISAM, but it would work fine for, like, for instance, my personal blog, but when you've got, say, hundreds of thousands of pages and loads of hits coming in all the time, updating the table was becoming a bottleneck. So changing it to this InnoDB format, which pretty much involves writing the last line in but changing food for table name, resolves that. And InnoDB just allows you to, it doesn't lock the whole table when you go to write or update it, it only locks a particular row effectively. So that, for instance, solved that problem. Then have a look around to see what WordPress is up to. So in our case, we saw that MooTools was being loaded on every page. But wait a minute, it wasn't actually being used. So skip that out. There's sort of like 300 kilobytes or whatever saved per page and so on. You can move stuff onto some sort of content delivery network, so that's really getting someone else to host something for you. All the JavaScript libraries and so on are normally hosted by people like Google and so on, so you can use them. And in our case, I changed the caching backend that WordPress was using, so that's just like a WordPress plugin that sort of makes things a bit quicker. I changed it from WP Super Cache to W3 Total Cache. The reasons being is that I could use other technologies and then it would do a few other clever things. Other things to do with WordPress, well, you can minify JavaScript, CSS, so that's stripping out white space, comments and all that sort of stuff. Depending how lucky you are, that might reduce the file size by about 60-70%. When looking through the site, that's when I sort of realised, hang on a minute, these idiots are retaining the whole image, which is like, you know, sort of 600 pixels by 600 or whatever, but they're shrinking it down in HTML just to like, you know, 100 by 100. Why are they, you know, what idiot wrote this theme to start with? Why are they doing that? Because, you know, rather than having an image that's like a megabyte in size being sent back, we could get away with, for instance, 50k or whatever it is. So that was quite a useful thing to do. So hence you'll see there's a big drop in the bandwidth usage on one of the graphs. And Google have this page speed service, I think it's called, or PageRank, whatever it is. There's a WordPress plugin for it anyway. And Google will give you like a speed report for your site, linked to or sort of to Google's mod page speed if you've come across that. And to start with, before I did much tinkering, they were scoring like about 30 out of 100, so it's saying, you know, these massive images have been resized in HTML, you know, you've got all this crap you're not using, you should minify this, that and the other. And I've got it up to about 75 to 84, depending on what page you're looking at and what time of the month it is. So, for instance, when I changed the thumbnails over to actually use thumbnails rather than just shrinking the image in HTML, you can see we have a nice drop-off in sort of the volume of traffic that Apache is sending back. So that's obviously a fairly good thing to have happen. I don't think Byte might charge for bandwidth, so it doesn't really affect them from a cost point of view, but obviously if the page loads quicker, hopefully people are more likely to click next or look at another page and so on. Other things we've done, they have a silly gallery page which, depending on what browser you uses, would list, for instance, maybe about 200-300 pictures, you know, for the various albums they've got. We've used some JavaScript on there, so when you load the page, it only actually fetches the images for what you can see on the page, and as you scroll down, it sort of fetches them by sort of like a magic-y sort of Ajax-ish way, but no Ajax being used. So hence the lazy load plugin. So obviously, if someone isn't going to scroll down the page, and they're not going to, you know, might bother downloading the pictures and so on. The only problem that's left is kind of the ads in JavaScript that get pulled into the site from third parties. You know, it includes a load of Flash, JavaScript, iframes and all this crap. Unfortunately, it's totally out of our control. Depending on what browser you're using, you'll see errors coming from it, where they've left like debug stuff and so on. It's a pain, and I can't really do much about it, but I can try and at least make sure everything else is alright. One thing I did try was using JavaScript to delay loading various parts of the page. So my idea being is that I would load the actual content on the page, if there's any, first, and then, like for instance, once that's loaded, then load in the JavaScript along the top, then load in the adverts on the right, and so on. Unfortunately, the trouble with that is it wouldn't always register that, you know, the ad impression being, and the guy who owns the site, he gets paid based on impressions rather than actual click-throughs. So to him, the most important thing is that ad loads no matter what. So hence didn't really manage that too well. And obviously, you know, every week goes by and he'll phone up saying, we need this new advert placed on here, so and so ad codes changed and so on. So that's a bit of a pain, and that sort of leads to having to, you know, store the whole site in Git or whatever. With Memcache, I enabled it sort of here, and you can see there was a nice drop off in the load of MySQL in terms of the number of queries and so on. I wasn't expecting that at the time. I thought, oh, well, I'll just try it, you know, give Memcache like 100 meg or something, and to see what happens. And then it was like, oh wow, everything's a bit snappier. So that was kind of pleasing to me, as it were, and you can see the Memcache traffic starts at the same time. And from a sort of year-on-year basis, or over the last year, you can see there's a nice drop-off in terms of MySQL traffic towards the end, so that was pretty good. Dead ends, don't bother with Google's mod page speed. As far as I can see, it might work fine on a fairly small site, but whenever I enabled it on Anorak server, the load would sort of slowly climb up and up and up, and then sort of crash. I don't quite know why it didn't work, but I've seen other people complain or have similar problems on the mailing list for it. In an ideal world, that mod page speed thing would be brilliant, because it resizes all the images appropriately, it minifies the CSS, HTML, JavaScript and everything. Unfortunately, it didn't seem to cope with the load. And so
Does mod page speed do cache control headers?
Yeah, it claims to do everything, and it will do pretty much everything on your test environment in the office. Unfortunately, when it got out there, it didn't. So this is like a random screenshot I took from using mod page speed on my internal server. And the only interesting thing to note, which you probably can't read, is it rewrites all the CSS and JavaScript files and puts these unique tokens in the end. So if someone goes there, hopefully it's effectively putting a version number in at the end to help the browser cache it, enforce caching and so on. And you can see these sort of lines down here are pretty narrow to imply to show, at least show that it is storing stuff in some sort of memory cache and returning stuff really quickly. But it didn't work for me, so there we are. Anyway, as a sort of summary and a very long lightning talk, the browser-based caching, so setting the expires headers and everything is helping them quite a lot because there's so many images stay the same from one page impression to the other because a lot of the content's the same. Reducing the page size fine and whatever, faster loading, hopefully means that they can cope with more traffic in the future when they get their next set of pictures of someone's boobs or whatever. And so on. So that's that. Future ideas. One of the reasons I installed this W3 Total Cache thing was it sort of claimed that it would support minification of CSS and JavaScript. I tried turning it on and it just returned back invalid CSS and JavaScript depending on which browser you're using. So I turned that back off. They've had an update since I did that and it claims to have fixed it, but I haven't tried it yet. Obviously, I should really talk to Mr. Anoak and persuade him he needs more than one server, but he's in the publishing industry, apparently has no money. I think the next thing I'd like to do is to stick varnish in front of Apache so that all that sort of non-dynamic stuff can be cached. And hopefully that would reduce their memory usage because Apache is pretty heavy on a sort of per processor basis. And at that point, hopefully they'll be able to scale up to serve a lot of people quicker. That's that. The boring site itself, well, you can sort of see, we've got like random adverts at the top, which are pretty annoying, loads of silly pictures, loads of headlines that are designed to grab Google's attention, perhaps. But when I look at it, for instance, in Firebug, if I can go up enough, and maybe that's just like vaguely visible, you can see there's loads of stuff on the server itself, and I've got all my caching headers hopefully set vaguely correct to persuade the browser to cache stuff. But as we go down, blah blah blah, I must have got a lot of images on this page somewhere. Aside from there being a lot of requests for making, there's also a lot of servers that the browser ends up talking to. Maybe it's Facebook, maybe it's like Google Ads, maybe it's some random third party. Depending on who it is, will depend on quite what comes back. But you can see it's quite a lot, and at the moment, the front page is maybe about 1.5 meg, but it will probably take, depending on the day of the week, about somewhere like this seems rather quick at the moment, sort of 7 seconds. Normally it takes about 15 seconds to load the page, which is perhaps a bit sucky, but I will keep working on it, so we shall see. So that's that. Any random questions?
Site?
How big do you want in terms of content or what?
Yeah, content volume. Broadly.
Well, when you say big, are you just asking me like how many hits does it have a month or something? Or
No, I'm asking you
how many articles there are.
If we extracted all of the files that constitute his contribution to what I see in the browser, how big is it on average?
Well, it's all stored in the database, most of the content. So the files within WordPress, I don't know, wouldn't be that many in the scheme of things. Maybe sort of, if you remove all the images, perhaps 100 meg at the very most. Right. There isn't a huge amount of PHP code there. Most of the content on the server is images, so he's got like loads of photo galleries on there, which I think there's probably about sort of 5-10 gigabytes of images on there, various sort of qualities and so on.
So you could hold a lot in RAM, basically.
Yes, but that wouldn't necessarily help. I don't know.
I was just trying to understand it. Overall, how big is it?
Well, The other annoyance on the site is that it's in Plesk, so it sort of gets in the way of life and so on. I'm not sure how long that will take to come back, but that'll tell you roughly how much data is like on the web server.
Can I ask, I don't really know anything about database backends because it's something I never use, but you seem to imply that a lot of the content that was getting called was static content.
Yep.
Is there any advantage to moving that out into something like THTTP or one of the very fast...
That's what Varnish would be potentially useful for,
right,
to effectively cache all that crap, so that it doesn't have to go to Apache, just because Apache is relatively heavy in the scheme of things, because you've got PHP loaded into it, you've got various other things, and each Apache process will use...
But you could go beyond caching and actually, you could run a small web server on port 81 or something and make the references be to port 81.
Yeah.
It would still be pulling from the same machine, but you might get...
Well, again, but you could just use Varnish for that, or another reverse proxy, or reverse cache, whatever they get called out. So, well, the site itself, 7.3 gig, but the database would be a bit bigger, which I can't tell you the size of easily. But from memory, I think there's about 200, no, that's about 100,000 posts, I think, and there's like about 800,000 comments, and some of which might be crap, but
well, I mean, order of magnitude, it's a flash drive.
yeah.
So,
Well, the problem isn't really I/O as such. It's more of trying to... Well, I/O is obviously an issue, but I can store the whole database in RAM if I want to, and I could store everything else in RAM, but I still wouldn't necessarily be able to run, the 400 Apache processes that I would need to service all the requests at the same time.
Have you considered using Nginx instead of Apache?
No, I'd avoid Nginx, not because I don't like it, because Peter, one of my employees, does keep going on about it, but my hope is I can stick with Apache, which I understand and know, and stick Varnish in front of it, which will give me the same benefit as far as I can tell. My understanding is they both scale in a similar manner, so why would I bother using Nginx if I can use Varnish, which I use elsewhere?
Again, I'm not a database person, but I'm struck by the fact that you've got memcached caching for MySQL.
Yeah.
Why does MySQL need a memory caching service for it if it's a modern database?
Well, it has its query cache, but it's not... the query cache isn't like that good, as in I think with MySQL's query cache I have a feeling it's done at a table level or something, is it? Or do you know anything about it?
Memcached doesn't make the same guarantees that what you get back from the cache is exactly what was committed.
Right.
Database in theory is ACID, whereas I don't think memcache is.
No, well, but obviously being a cache it doesn't matter if it's not there.
How does that relate to the speed necessarily? You're saying
Memcache doesn't have to be as stringent about invalidating cached items, whereas MySQL has to lock tables and actually check that what's in memory is the same as on disk. Is my guess.
it still seems a bit of a shocking thing.
It's a very common pattern to put memcached in front of
I
MySQL.
thought you liked saying, big screen
So
back.
this isn't an optic.
And it may be common, but still, I'm surprised that a database would need that. I just thought it would have been built into the database.
Do you have access to the analytics for this site?
No, I only have access to the Google Webmasters thing. He has another analytics thing, which I can't remember the details for, which is kind of like Google Analytics, as in it sort of updates almost in real time, telling you how many hits you had in the last 10 minutes or whatever. But no, I don't have access to analytics.
Okay.
I'm not sure if he does either, actually. Oh no, he must do, because there was analytics code buried in the page. Perhaps I should persuade him to.
Google is quite famous to say, if your page loads in half a second, that means you'll keep users. interested longer.
Well, yeah, that's
I was
part of
wondering if you'd seen a difference, but you haven't seen it.
I can't tell, but I can tell when a page loads, like it takes forever to load and it's a bit quicker.
I'm in an argument with Google at the moment where something's been down for a month and they've got people screaming and they don't seem to care.
So like this in pictures page here, before my new minion fixed it, you can just see as I scroll down the images and sort of maybe not. I think I click on something. Before, as I scroll down the page, you should see the pictures sort of suddenly load and so on. So it was the case that this just listed all albums that he'd ever created on the server. So there are like, I don't know, 300, 400, whatever. So if you were unfortunate enough to visit this page, your browser goes away and makes like 400 HTTP requests just for the images down here. And they had like this sort of JavaScript thingy here to like, jump to a particular thing, but it wasn't, particularly, it was only really moving you up and down in the page. You'd still make those 400 requests. So we changed that the other day so that it does this sort of lazy loading, which seems to work okay and makes the page a bit quicker to load and so on. There's a fixation on Madeline as well. I don't really know why. Yeah, so it's vaguely interesting from my point of view because I don't have any other customers that have quite the amount of traffic that this site does. But there we are. Any other questions, or do you want to listen to Alex?
It'd be interesting or not, perhaps, to know what the audience for these pages are like.
Yeah, I have no idea. I assume it's like sort of the same sort of people that read the Star Sunday Sport, if it still exists, or the Sun or whatever, and the Mirror and so on. You've got like any story about celebrities and so on, that'll get there. They've got like sister sites like Who Ate All the Pies, so that's the football variant of Anorak. Effectively the same sort of thing, but it's just all the football articles. Again, using WordPress and so on, again, has the same issues in terms of scalability and everything. And then there's Starlebrity, which is the celebrity variant. So here you've got presumably Jordan or someone, or she's still in the press, I don't know. But all these people I've never heard of. Having articles written about them. That's all I know. They're all there. They're all effectively the same. They're all functioning in the same way. They've all got WordPress. They've all got the caching things. So most of the pages are stored as static HTML for at least 30 minutes or something on the back end and so on. That's that.